Good morning, good evening, good day. I'm Andy Torres. I'm the director at American Embassy School. We'll get started with Courtney here in just a second, but I wanted to pipe in for just a moment or two before we start our webinar and share with you some news around our opening. I know we've had many people ask us about when we will and in what way we will be opening our school. And as I've mentioned before, and I want to reiterate again, August 4 is our target for our opening, and we will be clearly opening online on August 4. That'll be an online programs we're calling the AES Connected Campus programs. Those programs will be delivered through Zoom and other tools that we have at our avail at AES. The teachers and the leaders of our organization have been working very hard over the last many weeks to upskill and prepare for what we believe is going to be an amazing new school year. The thing that I think I want to make sure that all parents understand, and it's very important for me as the school leader, but also as a parent at AES, is that everything we're going to be doing in those classrooms, in our connected classrooms programs, will lead to and ramp up toward face-to-face classroom operations, which we feel is likely to start approximately 3 weeks after we begin on August 4. That's likely we'll begin those classroom programs around that time frame. We're monitoring and keeping an eye on the COVID-19 virus situation in Delhi, which seems to be trending in the right direction. And we're looking at a variety of other aspects, including our campus preparations and the avail to get our professionals in those classrooms so that we can deliver that high quality AES education that everybody expects and enjoys in the past. So we're very excited about getting our students back on campus. We're anxious, in fact, to see them again and to get our school up and running in the best way we possibly can, whether that be online through our connected campus programs, through our hybrid programs, which could be some online and some face-to-face, and or a full on-campus program that we're hoping and dreaming about starting as soon as we possibly can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the middle school team and Courtney Moreno, who will be talking to you about middle school literacy. We are going to be having 2 more webinars next week, one on social and emotional learning, which I know is of high interest to many parents, especially at the middle school level, where we got a lot of questions about that, and also about our support services for our EAL, second language learners, and our students who need additional academic support. With that, let's enjoy the work of our middle school team. Thank you.
I'm Courtney Moreno. I'm a middle school learning coach, the language arts department head, and a language arts and humanities teacher in the middle school. Today I'm going to be talking to you about our literacy program in the middle school at AES. Our middle school literacy program is grounded in 3 beliefs. The first one, we believe in modeling effective literacy strategies and skills, which means our instruction focuses on individual, small group, and whole class instruction. We base it in the workshop model of I try, we try, and then you try. And we use read alouds or think alouds. And the use of mentor text heavily in our classroom instruction. And we read and write along with the students so that they can see an authentic mentor work with them. Our second belief is that we believe in providing opportunities for students to engage in authentic literacy experiences. This means that assessments are authentic writing that we see in the real world. They're authentic reading assessments where they're in book clubs together. We offer a range of audiences for student work, and we work towards building a community of readers and writers. Our final belief is that we believe in building independence by providing time for students to practice and reflect upon their abilities. This means we give opportunities to self-assess, reflect, and set goals individually with partners and with the teacher. We construct rubrics and criteria for success together with the students and the teacher so that students are part of understanding what it means to be successful. And we focus on strategies and skills for growth, not on corrections. What this all means is that at the core of what we do is that we teach the writer, not the writing, and we teach the reader, not the reading. We put the students at the center of what we do. We teach writers and readers, not writing and reading. When you and I were in school, this was not the model. We usually were taught to read a specific book as an entire class and write essays on specific topics or specific books, and usually in the 5-paragraph essay structure. Thankfully, this is not the model anymore. One of the things that is beneficial from the old model is the shared literacy experience of reading a book together. And we haven't done away with the whole class novel. We've simply repurposed it. What we've done is that the teacher uses a whole class novel to model instruction, to model the strategies and skills that we want to teach. And then we have the kids go practice it in their own independent reading books and in their own independent writing. Research shows that kids demonstrate the most growth in reading and writing when they're reading books that are at their level and books that they're highly engaged in, so books that they want to read. If either of those criteria, appropriate level or interesting to the student, are not present, the opportunity for growth plummets. So we put a high emphasis on choosing just right books in our classrooms. Choice and independence is important to our writing program as well. Our units are developed around narratives or stories, informational writing, and argument writing based off of the Common Core standards. Within those genres, we build in choice on topics so that kids are writing about issues, moments, and topics that they care about. When kids are invested in their topics, they're invested in their writing. And when they're invested in their writing, it opens up the opportunity for us to help kids think critically about their work, what's working for them as a writer, and where they want to grow. As you can imagine, this puts a heavy emphasis on the writing process. All of this, both reading and writing, takes a great deal of independent practice. And that's why the majority of our class periods are spent with kids independently working and the teacher going around to individual kids or groups of kids and pushing in to teach on an individual level. A typical class period in our classrooms, whether it's virtual or brick and mortar, tends to have 4 main components. When we begin the class with the students, we start with a greeting. This might come in the form of a writing prompt or simply a check-in. This is when teachers get an emotional read on where their kids are. In a brick and mortar classroom, we would be on the lookout for, are the partnerships still working? How's the friendship? What's the energy level? We're really just getting kids ready to write and to read and to do the heavy work that we do in class. And we're also trying to get a feel of how much energy we need to bring and what that might feel like today. We then shift very quickly into a mini lesson. And that mini lesson really is a teacher-developed strategy or skill that can be applied to every kid in that classroom. These are not targeted at individual levels. They're broad enough to be able to scaffold for whatever level an individual student is at. So we'll present between 10 to 15 minutes. We'll do a modeled lesson or a read aloud with a lesson, but it's a targeted skill that everybody in the class can then practice. During that practice time in the mini lesson, we'll be looking over shoulders, or if it's virtual, we'll be asking kids to hold up their notebooks, and we'll be asking questions to make sure that kids get the general gist of it, and we can start to see who's going to need more individualized instruction, who's ready to go on to the next step, and really just get a feel for where kids are with this particular strategy. The mini lesson aspect of the class is mostly the teacher talking, and we try to keep that nice and short because we commonly are heard saying whoever is doing the talking is the one doing the thinking, and we want to make sure that that is reserved for the students as much as possible. So we choose one concrete strategy to present to the kids, and then we send them on, and then we give them a little bit of practice, and then we send them on their way to practice that skill, which moves us into independent work time. Kids then spend, and you can see from this graph, kids then spend the majority of the class period. In an 80-minute class period, they'll be spending 40 to 45 minutes in this independent work time. And during this independent work time, teachers are pushing in and teaching small group lessons for kids who have similar needs or who are ready for that next step or are working in the same part of the writing process, or we'll go one-to-one and do a lot of conferring with individual students, researching where they are as a reader or a writer, figuring out what that next step should be, offering them a teaching point and sending them on their way. These small little lessons can range from 2 minutes to 6 to 10 minutes even, depending on what is necessary for those kids. What we don't want is to spend too much time talking and not enough time having them practicing the skills. At the end of independent work time, we all come back together as a class. In a brick and mortar model, this means we come to a central part of the classroom usually, where we all kind of come together to share. And in a virtual model, we come back from breakout rooms or whatever model we were using to have independent work time, and we go ahead and share. This is a big part of building our writing and reading community, and it's an important part for kids to see that everybody's growing. In the beginning of the year, the teacher will model the share quite a bit to get kids used to sharing their work. And usually by the middle of the first semester, we're actually having to take turns on sharing because so many kids want to share the work that they're doing. And that's when we can tell that the reading and writing community is really, really developed nicely. So I've been talking about both virtual and brick and mortar models, and we actually see benefits to both models. And while I will not ever pretend that it isn't always going to be my preference to be in the classroom, physically present with the kids, we have come across some unexpected benefits of the virtual model. And regardless of which model we're in, we will be using the workshop model. And so whether we're virtual or brick and mortar, you can expect that type of class that I just described to be happening each and every time your child comes to a literacy classroom, which would be language arts or humanities in the 8th grade. But I did want to take a moment to go through some of the benefits of each model so that we can rest easy and know that no matter what, the kids are getting a really solid education. And each model has benefits. And my hope is that as we move forward, we can, when we go back into a brick and mortar model more exclusively at some point, that we can bring some of the things that we have from this virtual learning model, some of the benefits, and weave them into a brick and mortar model. So we all know the benefits of a brick and mortar model, but I want to start there to really think about and ground ourselves and remind ourselves about how wonderful it is. So the benefits of a brick and mortar model, we can't get around the fact that there are social benefits of a writing and reading community. There are social benefits of just being there together. And we can build a reading and writing community virtually, and we have, and we will continue to do that. But the reality is it's just easier in the classroom. You can fill your walls with student work and with inspiring quotes, and that's just harder to do. The share out is just a little bit more comfy and a little more inclusive when you are in a brick and mortar model. Another thing that is unavoidable is the resources. We've spent a long time building up amazing classroom libraries and resource centers in our classrooms at AES, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of. Is that when kids come to our classrooms, there is a book for them in it, and that doesn't take away from how important the big library is, the Stein Library. But it is, especially for some of our more reluctant readers, it is so important that they have a small, intimate library that they know they can find a book in, and that their teachers have cultivated with them in mind. And if they don't have a book there, that they can go to their teacher and say, hey, could you, is this a book that we have? And if not, we can buy it and it'll be there in 2 days. That's a really special part of classroom libraries. And I'm already missing those resources of getting those just right books in kids' hands. Another thing that is fabulous about brick and mortar is that we're all in the same time zone when we're together in a classroom. And that can't be underestimated, of having that whole class there together, rather than people doing flipped lessons. Some people being in the Zoom and some people doing it in a flipped capacity or a video when it works for their time zone. Immediate feedback. You're actually going to see this on the other list as well. And immediate feedback, we are very used to giving immediate feedback by being able to look around the room, go look over Ken's shoulders and say, ooh, hey, talk to me about this little part of your writing. That's beautiful. Or what did you mean by this? That immediate feedback is at the heart of what we do as educators. We know that the most effective feedback isn't us writing all over their pieces of writing or giving them comments on their Google Doc. They don't tend to look at that as much. What research shows is that the very best feedback we can give is the immediate verbal feedback when we are with them. So as soon as we look at their writing or their reading work and we give them immediate feedback of, oh, that's really interesting, say more. Any of that feedback is the feedback that actually helps them grow. And so in a brick and mortar model, we know how to give that feedback. That's everything we do all day, every day. And that's a really important piece of that brick and mortar model. Another important piece of the brick and mortar model is relationships. We build relationships by being together. And the last benefit is that there tend to be fewer distractions in the brick and mortar model, because our kids have everything they've ever been socialized to learn is that when you walk into a classroom, that's a learning space. And it is not their fault that they're getting distracted at home a little bit more, because they've been socialized. Our entire normalization has been that we learn at school, and when we go into our bedrooms at home, that's not really a learning space. That's sometimes why they're not as effective at homework at home. That's our brain isn't set up to think of that as that learning space. And so there are fewer distractions at school in that brick and mortar model. Then the benefits of the learning model, of the virtual learning model. There's more privacy. Kids can write more vulnerable pieces of writing that they don't feel comfortable sharing, and sometimes we've noticed they're more willing to take risks because it's not in front of everybody. They can sign up to do one-on-one or small group conferences, knowing that no one else is going to hear it. And we do find that kids take more risks. So actually that is something that when we do return to a brick and mortar model, I'm so eager to carry with me back to the classroom, is opening up an opportunity for kids to confer via Zoom, or whatever the model may be, or the platform, for kids to confer online if they want more privacy. That seems like a really great way. There's also there can be increased individualized instruction. We're really limited to time in the brick and mortar model. You have your kids from this time to this time on this day, and this day, and that's it. And with a virtual model, we found we have to be far more flexible. Kids are in different time zones. Teachers are in different time zones. And so while we do need to make sure we have boundaries on that, it does add more increased flexibility in how many kids we can talk to in a day, in a week. And again, I think this is something that a lot of us teachers are going to carry forward into a brick and mortar model, is figuring out ways that we can make sure we are conferring with all kids as much as possible, within the boundaries of also making sure we aren't working all day, every day, all the time. There's also immediate feedback. And so you saw this on the other side with brick and mortar, and we're going to put it here too, because no matter what we do, we are going to be offering immediate feedback. And with less ability to say, hey, just leave your writer's notebooks here, I'll take them home tonight and then give them back to you tomorrow. We don't have that option anymore. And so our feedback pretty necessarily has to be immediate, in the moment. And we're finding ways with those small group and one-on-one Zoom conferences, and with breakout rooms in Zoom, that we're able to offer a ton of immediate feedback. There's also an increase in appropriate independence and ownership of their learning. We can't be in every breakout room, right? We can't see what's happening in a brick and mortar room. We can have kids in small groups, but we can still hear. We might be with one small group, but we know what's going on over there. In breakout rooms, that's not true. And so what we end up doing is popping around to different breakout rooms or using different strategies. But what we've seen, and this is a testament to the parents at AES and what they've been doing with their kids, as well as the kids at AES, of that they're really stepping up into leadership roles in their classrooms, and they have to advocate for themselves a little bit more. And I think that's a really great thing. It's something we work really hard to build into the community of a brick and mortar model, but it's really, really difficult when a teacher's right there all the time. Basically anywhere you go in the school, you can find help. You can find somebody to support you. And that's just not always true in the virtual learning model, or it's not immediate all the time. So what we're seeing is that kids, rather than sending that email and waiting for 24 hours, 48 hours to go by before they get their response, they're starting to problem solve and troubleshoot on their own, which is amazing. I don't know how we can carry that one over into the brick and mortar model, but we sure are going to try, because it's really incredible to see the independence and the problem solving and the growth mindset that so many kids are showing with the virtual learning. And that's something that we want to carry over into a brick and mortar model. This summer is an interesting summer. Our kids have been out of the classroom for a considerable amount of time, and that bridge between school and not school is a little bit blurry, that line. And so often we'll talk to students and sometimes parents about what we call the summer slide. And that's the regression of skills between when they leave school at the end of the spring and come back to the school in the fall. And with that summer slide, what happens is that when they're not practicing skills every day, they quite literally go backwards. Now, we make up that time over the month, usually with 2 months off. It takes 3 weeks to a month to get those skills back, just to get them back into the flow of things. But with kids having been out of the classroom model for quite a bit more time than usual this year, we want to make sure that we are doing as much as we can without school being ongoing, to help them retain some of those skills and mitigate a bit of that summer slide. And the number one thing we can do, and this is not just because I love literacy, the number one thing research shows to help kids be successful in academics and to curb that summer slide is read. So we want your kids reading this summer. Read, and then read. But I want to push us a little bit in how we think about reading, because reading really comes down to two big aspects. And there's reading actual text and understanding the words on the page. And then there's also critical reading thinking, like how we think about reading. And for one of those, you need books. You need text that they're actually getting their eyes on the page. And that's that first one. We want to make sure that kids are consuming text. So they're reading novels, they're reading news articles, if that's what they're interested in, that they're reading actual text. Now, this can be graphic novels, it can be comic books, it can be novels, it can be news articles, it can be whatever, but we want them getting their eyes on text. So whatever that is, it's just text. And that's going to get their brain working about decoding words and keeping up with their speed. Ideally, this would be just right books for them, something they're interested in that's at their level. Summer is not the time for kids to be pushed into books that they don't want to read, reading books that are highly academic. We often see over the summer that kids will stop reading as much. And the number one reason they say is that they said, well, my parents wanted me to read this book and this book, and I just didn't really like it. Not trying to throw parents under the bus. I'm one. I do that to my own children. I just want us to have it on our radar of being conscientious of the fact that this is their fun time. This is their break. And we're going to push them really hard with books. And if they're ready for it, push them out of their comfort zone with what they're reading in school. And the summer is not for that. Think about when you go on vacation. Most of the time we bring there's a word for it. They're beach reads. They're literally called that because that's what people want to read on vacation. So let's think about our kids in this really authentic readership way. They want to read beach reads. They want to read what's fun right now. And let's let them do that. Those are the perfect books. I really encourage you, and we've done this with our kids, with the kids, think about reading series, because there's that little part there between when they read a book and finish it and when they pick up another one. And I call that like the black hole because it's when kids stop reading and it's because they don't know what's next. And I fall into the black hole all the time as a reader. When I finish a book and I try 10 different books and I just can't really get into them. And we're pretty good at helping pull kids out of the black hole when we're in school, or we even reach our hand across the black hole and they can jump right on over it and not even dip their toe in. But during the summer, that's a lot harder. And so we encourage kids to read series during the summer because you don't really have to think about what book comes next. There's just another one that's right there. And you usually want to read it because the previous book probably left you on a cliffhanger. So if you're having trouble getting your kid, if you notice that they're falling into that black hole in between books, get them in a series. If you notice that they're reluctant to read, really prioritize fun books. Get them even into comic books at first, just so that they're getting their eyes on a text. And then the second part of reading is just critical thinking, right? It's thinking about media that we consume. It's thinking about the themes. It's thinking about the literary devices and the elements of fiction that are used. It's thinking about word choice. And I want to expand our definition of text in this circumstance. Kids don't have to be reading a book to do this work. They could be watching a movie. They could be watching a TV show. Heck, they could be watching TikToks, and they all are. They can be playing video games and do all of this work. They can be thinking about setting. Animal Crossing, a video game a lot of kids are playing, is very, very different from Halo, another video game. What makes those different? How do we know, and how do you know if you're going to probably like one and not the other? Those are very different audiences that are attracted to those. One is cute little fuzzy animals, and it's very, as a student told me, it's very vibey. I just learned what that means. But we've got a very vibey, cute, sweet video game. And then we have Halo, which is guns, and it's military, and it's you really feel like you're in, the graphics are incredible and you feel like you're in a real world. It's a very different setting. It's a very different tone. And the story arc is very different. So kids can be doing all of the same thinking about whatever media they're consuming. And as parents, we can be asking them, well, why do you like that? And what stories are being told here? What stories aren't being told here? And that issue of stories that are being told and stories aren't being told is a really important one right now as we look around the world. And in the United States, Black Lives Matter is a huge issue in the United States right now. And a lot of that has to do with what stories aren't being told. What stories have we missed? What stories have we silenced? What stories have we amplified? And so getting your kids to think about the media that they're consuming is going to be a really wonderful and helpful tool that will impact their academic success in all of their subjects, not just in social studies and language arts. You can have them think about the characters that are in the media that they're consuming. What gender? What color? What race are they? Can we tell anything about religion or language? There's just a lot there that we can dig into, and it doesn't just have to be in books. So with reading this summer, we do want your kids reading text. Ideally, they'd be reading for 30 to 40 minutes every day. I know that's a tall order, so please don't feel like a failure if you can't get your kid to do that. But if there's one thing we should be nagging our children about, it's reading. You have my permission to nag all you want to your kids about reading, and not in a way, it doesn't have to be in a way where they're getting in trouble. I found the very best way for most parents to engage their kids in reading is just to remind them how important it is. The best people are readers. It's just true. And to model it for your kids. Please sit down and read with your children this summer. If they see you reading, if you carve out family time for a reading, they will internalize that this is a valuable part of who we are as a family. And nobody's ever been made worse by reading, right? So if we carve it out as a family, we're all going to get better. We're all going to be better people for having family reading time every day. If it's hard to get your kid to engage in that book on their own, read it aloud to them. They love read aloud. They love it. They beg for it every single day. So in class. So do some read aloud with your kids. It doesn't matter if they are 5, 15, 25. Read aloud with your kids. They're going to love it. And then if you can, get them to write a little bit. Get them to write, ideally it would be 10 minutes every day, but I know that that's a really difficult thing to do. It's been my goal and I haven't reached it yet. So getting kids to write could be a really important thing. And it can be as simple as, what are you grateful for? Or what was really hard today? And we sort of offer that up to our children as an option. You can do gratitude, or you can do what's troubling you. And ideally, you would do both, because a lot of days when we're feeling troubled, it helps to also identify what we're grateful for. And if they just jot it down, then they can share it with you or not. But just a quick jot of, what are you grateful for? What's troubling you? For kids who are excited about writing, because I know there are a lot of kids out there who've reached out to their teachers and said, I'm working on these stories, or I'm writing poetry, or I'm keeping a pandemic journal. Just encourage your kids. And if they are writing, try to push them to share with you. I know middle schoolers tend to shut down a little bit on sharing, but once they break through that initial share or the initial few times of sharing, you'll see they'll want to share more. Do not correct their work. Unless they specifically ask for a type of constructive criticism, do not give them feedback on their work, right? Because they'll stop sharing. And we don't want them to stop sharing their work with you. We'll do constructive criticism and feedback in school. Right now, it's just developing that love of writing and keeping them open to sharing with you. Now, if they ask for constructive criticism and feedback, yeah, have at it, go. But we want kids to feel like they can share their work with their parents. And that just means championing them and praising them and saying, oh my God, I loved it. Thank you for sharing. I especially loved this part. Before we go, I want to reiterate a phrase that I often use with parents or give to parents when they're working with their kids on any form of thinking. And it's that magical phrase that will push kids to keep opening up. And the more you say it, the more they will. And if they share their writing with you, if you're talking about reading and they're giving you these one-word answers, say just a very simple, say more about that. Not can you say more about that? Because then they'll say, no. Say more about that. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Say more about that. Well, what did you mean by? Say more about that. Kids are used to this because teachers do it to them all the time. They will likely roll their eyes. They're very good at it. But just keep pushing it back at them. Say more about that. I want to know more. Our kids want to feel heard. They do. And they get shy or they don't want to share because they might be embarrassed. They might feel insecure. They don't know how it's going to be received, but they want to be heard. They want to share their voices. And what we found is that the more you push at them, say more about that. Oh, that's interesting. Say more. Letting them know that what they have to say is worthwhile will make them want to share with you. So it's awkward, but you're an adult. You can out-awkward your kids. You can outlast them on that. Keep pushing it back at them and keep getting them to open up. All right. So this summer, our big goals would be get your kids to read, reading texts, thinking critically about the media they're consuming, and then maybe doing a little bit of jotting about their life with some writing every day or every other day. That's really it. We look forward to seeing you in the fall.
Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate the time you put into researching that. And welcome to all our parents. I'm just wondering, we've got some opportunity now for Q&A if you've got any questions specifically, especially while we have Courtney here, we've trapped her. We can talk a little bit more about literacy in the middle school or any questions you have, or if you're looking for tips, suggestions on books, Courtney's got a whole bunch. So if you want to add some questions, you can use the Q&A, preferably one question per post. That will help us. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? I'm looking at our panelists here. Okay, well, we'll see if there's any questions. Courtney, tell us about a good book that we would be reading right now if we were in 7th grade, while we wait for questions.
Oh, there are so many. I'm currently reading Jackpot by Nick Stone. Nick Stone is an author that a lot of our kids have read. She wrote Dear Martin, which is a book about, a lot of our kids have read Dear Martin. It's a book about a young Black kid who is kind of struggling with identity, and he ends up writing letters to Martin Luther King Jr. just to like get his thoughts out and stuff and figure himself out, because he's struggling with this idea of sort of your perfect hero. And he's like, I don't know how to be that person. So a lot of our kids have read Dear Martin, and there's a follow-up to it coming out in October called Dear Justice, and it deals with the criminal justice system in the United States. But I'm reading another book by her that is called Jackpot, and deals with more socioeconomic issues, but it's really fun. It's like a mystery. And that's what we're noticing in young adult and especially middle grade literature is finally they figured out that middle school readers are really passionate about social issues. So there are tons of books out there right now about climate change. That's the one that's really up and coming. It's called Cli-Fi, which is hilarious and perfect. But they're taking social issues and they're writing middle grade novels about it, which is really wonderful. And so whatever topic your kid is interested in, there are books out there for them, especially at the middle grade and then young adult. Before, there was a huge surge of young adult novels that were written, thinking Hunger Games, Divergent, along those lines. And now we're starting to see more of a surge of middle grade books being written, which I think is really great because young adult really focuses, you can pretty much count on your protagonist, your main character, being high school. And so the issues that they deal with outside of, whatever's going on in the book, the issues are high school focused. So you're dealing with a little more mature content. Whereas with middle grade, it's they're dealing with friendship issues. They're dealing with stuff that middle schoolers tend to deal with.
So you'll see less drugs and alcohol, and more mature romantic relationships featured, and it focuses more on what middle schoolers actually deal with. That didn't really answer your question, Anthea, but I really like talking about that stuff.
Yeah, I know. Once Courtney gets started on talking about books, we can spend a day talking about them, which is kind of handy when you teach English language arts. We have a few questions, a couple which we've answered just quickly in the chat. I had one here. Courtney, maybe I'll hand this one over to you. I'm going to put you on the spot. We have a question that asks, what do you do if your child doesn't really read at all? Parents are a reader, but daughter doesn't want to read.
Yeah, that's Eileen's question, right? Okay, so you really focus on those just right books, and you try different strategies of how to help them read. I know for some kids, a reading tracker, actually, we used to think of it as like a reading log, and that can get pretty tedious, but simple, like I was successful today, of reading just a yes or no, is really, really helpful, because kids like to feel successful. Checklists are great for our brains. We get a little endorphin rush when we check off a checklist. So yeah, letting them, putting the power in their court, but also reminding them. And truly, the number one way is, we're all sitting down and reading together right now. We're going to do 15 minutes. We're going to sit down. It is quiet reading time as a family. And I know there's a time crunch. It's hard to carve out 15 minutes as a family. But that's going to be, for a reluctant reader, just right books and reading with your kid are going to be the best. Being open to audiobooks is a really great thing, especially right now during the summer. You just want them with that input. And it's communicating with the teacher when we do get back into school, of saying, hey, my kid is a bit of a reluctant reader. That way we have it on our radar to continue to address it. Yeah, that's what I would say, is ways for the kid to feel successful, of checking off and giving them some power that way. Getting those just right books and carving out reading time at home as a family.
Thanks, Courtney. We have another question, I guess similar vein, slightly different, about coming into sixth grade and having recommended they read a certain number of books over the summer. Certainly, I mean, Courtney, you can follow up on this, but of course, teachers, one thing they'll do is check in on what kids have been reading and what they're interested in, and they'll use that to sort of get to know them as readers and recommend interesting books. I'm not sure if they'll check off the list. I don't know, Courtney, if you want to add to that about sort of what kids read over the summer and reviewing what they read.
Yeah, this question of recommended to read 40 books during the summer. I don't even that's a lot. I'll be really clear. I'm certainly not reading 40 books this summer. That's a huge number. We generally expect kids, if they're reading just right books, we can expect them to read one, especially at this level, when books are quite a bit longer and more complex. We can expect them to read a book, generally one book every week to 2 weeks is a pretty good benchmark. And that's in class. Then you add in that it's summertime, and I would say the reality is they're probably we'd love them to read 1 to 3 books a month, and that's going to be great as long as there's that consistency in reading. There's no magic number of how many books they should be reading. It's really more about consistency and reading a just right book. If somebody told me I was supposed to read 40 books during the summer, I'd say, you're crazy. I've got this really heavy duty book I'm reading. Or the length is dependent. There's a lot there. So if they're in a just right book, you can expect them to read in a just right book and reading for 30 minutes to an hour every day. Sure, you can expect a kid to read a book a week or every 2 weeks, but that's sort of my general ballpark of what I would expect.
Thanks, Courtney. We've had a couple of questions in the same area, so I'll just try and put them together. Questions around humanities and English language arts and social studies being separate or combined. They were combined. It's a model in middle schools. Sometimes they come together under humanities and sometimes they're separate in English, language arts, and social studies. We have separated them in 6th and 7th grade. In 8th grade though, and again, I'm going to throw it to Courtney in this one in a minute, what we are intentionally doing this year, even though it's under the same banner of humanities, we have developed, or Courtney's developing during her break, separate literacy units and social studies units. So although they come together, they'll actually be discrete skills, I guess, that we could call it. Courtney, if I covered that.
Yeah. I love that this question got asked. It validates what I've done all summer. So I think one of the reasons we chose to keep 8th grade as humanities and separate 6 and 7 is a developmental thing. We felt really comfortable keeping that 8th grade because their brains are more set up to synthesize, which is an important aspect of humanities. And it's one of the reasons we broke them apart in 6th and 7th is we said, we need using a humanities model assumes the ability to synthesize. And that's a more realistic expectation by 8th grade. That being said, we're still doing a lot of work. I've just rewritten the curriculum to really piece out. We'll have a language arts unit, heavy language arts unit, then a more heavy social studies unit. And then we have a couple units that are really kind of targeted at both. But you'll have a language arts and then a social studies, and then we'll have kind of a short unit that goes, hey, what happens if we really smush them together? And I'm excited about the new curriculum to really do justice to both language arts and social studies. And so it is still humanities in the 8th grade model this coming year, but it's going to look quite a bit different than it has in previous years. And you'll find we're going to do parent newsletters and or videos to send home at the beginning to say, here's what you can expect out of this unit. And you'll know this is primarily a language arts unit. And then here are the social studies things that are kind of going on in the background, or this is primarily a social studies unit, but here's the literacy that's coming through. When I talk about the curriculum, you'll hear me talk about literacy, which goes across all of the disciplines. That's in art, that's in math, that's in science, it's in all the disciplines. So when I'm saying literacy, that's across all of them. And then there's language arts. And that was a big reason we actually chose to split, was because we were doing a lot of literacy, but we weren't doing a lot of language arts. And so we want to make sure that we are honoring that creative writing, the reading, the independent reading, the self-chosen reading, and writing. And that's where we get the language arts piece in there.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm just looking through some of the other questions. There's one I started typing an answer to, but I might as well just answer that really quickly. We've covered literacy here. What about math, science, or other middle school programs? We do actually have a scheduled math. Well, when we're on campus, we have a scheduled math night in early September. We will do that whether we're on campus or in Zoom. So that's a session run by the math teachers to help families engage in learning math, not just about the program, but you get to see some things that students do in the classroom and have a bit of fun. So that one will come up once we're back at school. I'm looking through here for any other literacy ones that we can check off. Another one around motivating reading. I think, Courtney, you've already answered that one a little bit, how to get kids to read during the break. There's a question here around, oh, sorry, you take that one.
With the motivation piece, it is totally appropriate for parents. You can reach out to me and ask for resources of, if you don't know how to find books, reach out to your kid's previous language arts teacher. You can absolutely reach out to me. We spend a lot of time making sure we know how to get just right books in kids' hands. And so we're happy to serve as resources for that. Don't hesitate to reach out. We want kids reading. We will, that's the one thing we will pretty much do anything to get to happen, is getting just right books in your kids' hands. And if you don't have consistent access to new books, especially during this time, because our kids don't have the Stein Library or our classroom libraries, I do really recommend them getting an e-reader, like a Kindle or something like that, because that's going to be the best way for them to get new books that they want to read right now. So if you don't have direct access to new books that they can kind of go through and look through, an e-reader is going to be invaluable during this time.
Thanks, Courtney. We had, I think, a question related to EAL students requiring additional English language support. So we have, and again, I'll let Courtney add into this one, but students who have EAL support actually are in the English language arts classroom, and there are dedicated EAL teachers who work alongside them. At the end of last year, that meant they attended Zoom classes with the students, but it also meant that they offered them separate times to check in and work in small groups and work one-on-one. So it actually worked quite well even when we were online. And one of the goals, I think, going into this year is being much more aware of giving students, particularly students still acquiring English language, to have more opportunity to speak and interact so that they keep their English language acquisition going as much as maintaining their native language. And both of those are very important. But there'll be a little more information sent to middle school parents about our EAL program and who's going to be supporting your child and the way we're going to support them. So thank you for that question, but know that there's actually a dedicated information thing coming away soon. All right, have we got any other questions here? We've got a question around band. We can run band online. It's going to be interesting. At the end of the year, it was easier with instruments in hand, but the band teachers are working, and the strings and vocal teachers are working on different ways to do that. You certainly do some theory, and you can have kids perform, and so we'll have to get a bit creative with our beginning band, our sixth graders perhaps. But other students, our programs allow kids to record themselves and also check in on their tone and pitch, because I know that because I'm also trying it myself. So it's possible, it's just not as much fun. And it's also challenging if you've got a household of people listening to you practice.
Anthea, I think you'll find they've also been working a little bit more and have had an opportunity to work a little bit more on the ideas of composition, which they might not normally get a chance to do. So they're getting to try new ways of creating music, even though they might not have the instruments. We've got a lot of programs and apps that they can use, and they're actually getting a chance to learn a little bit more about music composition, which has not traditionally been part of the program. So it's quite exciting.
Thank you. Yes, they shifted to that at the end of the year. It was exciting. It allowed kids to be quite creative with their the skills that they already had. We've got a question around Zoom meetings. I think I'm going to interpret that as you mean, will we have separate Zoom class times if people are in different time zones? Unfortunately, I don't have a straight answer for that yet. What we're trying to ascertain are where our people are around the world. We know they're spread, but we'd like to get some numbers. We'll certainly have recordings of classes, and we want to provide ways for students to connect with teachers that might be more suitable to their time zone. So we're working on how that works for kids. What we don't really want is a child up in the middle of the night trying to interact with people in their classroom. So it's not going to be perfect for everyone, but as a community, we're looking for the best possible community building thing, which means connecting as many people as we can in the best way we can. We have one question left here. It says, is taking MAP tests virtually in the pipeline? It's not at this point, but we haven't started back at school yet. We certainly didn't do it at the end of last year. We were lucky we got one set of MAP tests in, and we also got our writing set in, which I'm pleased to say we're well on track. So, but we haven't mapped that out yet. But thanks for that question. Ilva, I don't know if you want to answer the one around the open house. Is that something that falls over there?
In terms of the family orientation?
Well, there's definitely, yeah, you take that.
Yeah, so August 3rd, we are planning a virtual family orientation, and we are really excited about it. So we'll let it be a surprise. It will be celebration and being excited to make sure that everybody knows that, okay, summer is over and school has started, and we'll introduce many of our team members, staff members, and some of the practical things. But it's coming up, and we'll give you more information soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilva. And there's definitely times for students to connect. We would do that on campus, and the counsellors have got things planned to connect with ambassadors. And yeah, we're looking forward to that. It's coming around much faster than it should, it feels like. I don't have any more active questions. Do any of our panelists have anything left to add?
Andy, you're
Andy,
muted.
You're on mute.
Anthea, we are at the hour, so I think we have planned these for 60 minutes, and we've filled that quite full. So Courtney, great job. Thank you so much. I just was sitting here inspired, joking around with my panelists that I've went and found a novel and immediately began reading this morning. So maybe I'll get through War and Peace this time. But I'd really, yeah, no, I'm not going to read War and Peace. But I do enjoy books. I drive my colleagues crazy by constantly referring them to texts. But that's just the way we should be doing with all of us. And I hope that parents, you've been inspired to get out there with your children and read books. You know, one quick thing, Courtney, I forgot. I didn't see any question about audiobooks, which I really enjoy on car rides or just hanging around the house, play it off of my television. Also a good thing with kids.
Audiobooks are fantastic. We highly recommend that kids are listening to audiobooks. It can be, for some of those more reluctant readers too, that can be a bridge into that text. It also is a great way. We find a lot of kids like to read novels, but get informational texts through audiobook. Either way, we love audiobooks. Listen to audiobooks. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We look forward to seeing you at our webinars next week. Have a wonderful, restful, and safe and healthy weekend.